He wasn't the neighbor anymore. He wasn't that guy that anyone thought they knew. He was a murderer. He was a rapist. He was a child molester. He was the worst of the worst that society produces, a monster who hid in plain sight behind ordinary faces, ordinary jobs, ordinary family smiles, ordinary conversations about oil changes and maintenance-free vans. That single realization tears through every person who ever trusted him, every sibling who shared blood and childhood beds, every investigator who stared into the eyes of someone who had already decided a 14-year-old girl would not live to see another day. The body found in the woods, plastic wrapped over the upper part of her, a shirt half pulled off, nude from the waist down, a long needle driven through her ear and into her brain, a belt used as a ligature around her neck, a sledgehammer finishing what the hands and the belt and the needle had begun. This was not a runaway. This was calculated, cold, and vicious beyond anything many seasoned detectives had ever processed in careers filled with homicides. Christy Onstead was 14. She attended Fairhaven Middle School. Her mother had reported her missing after she was supposedly taken to school and never returned home. At first, it looked like another rebellious teen who had taken off. The kind of report that arrives every week and usually resolved with a phone call or a sighting at a friend's house. Then the backpack turned up in a ditch about a mile from the house. Clothing and belongings still inside. Runaways do not discard their things that way. The pattern is wrong. The stepfather organized a search that felt less like looking for a living girl and more like recovering a body. People walking through backyards and looking under brush. Steering volunteers east while the actual site lay 8.5 miles in the opposite direction. When he finally spoke the words that he hadn't got a clue where she was, but honestly he didn't think she was kicking, that she was probably dead because she had a big mouth. The detective knew in that exact moment. Probable cause had not yet arrived, but certainty had settled like ice. The van was searched with a borrowed flashlight under the pretense of looking for a dropped note. Nothing obvious turned up. He was released for the night because there was not enough to hold him. The fear that followed was the kind that keeps a detective awake and pacing. A man capable of this level of cruelty could run, could kill again, could disappear under any of the multiple false identities already discovered in a box of state identifications at the house, all bearing his photograph under different names. By morning, he was gone on supposed errands that stretched longer and longer. A bolo went out under every name he had used. Hours later, the search crew found the body in a wooded area. Identification was immediate from the photographs the mother had provided. The crime scene told the full story of manual strangulation first, then the belt as ligature, then the long needle from the toolbox shoved to the left ear and into the brain, then the plastic garbage bag over the head, when she still moved and made noise, then the sledgehammer strikes until she was finally still. He had molested her in the past. When she threatened to disclose during what he called discipline, he chose that morning to end the threat permanently. He drove her not to school, but to the place where her body would later be found. At some point during that ride, she must have understood she was not coming home. That knowledge sits at the absolute center of the cruelty. The moment the realization arrived for a 14-year-old girl that the man who was supposed to protect her had decided she would not survive the trip, he turned himself and eventually at a police department, telling the officer to lock him up for murder. He confessed in detail, described each method, each moment she still moved or made noise, each decision to continue until she was gone. The twin brother who had protected him through childhood, who had shared the same beds in a full house with an outhouse and a wood stove, and never thought they were poor, because there was always food on the table, who had felt the twin connection that lets one know what the other is about to say or feel, learned the truth and felt the irreversible fracture. 27 years later, he still cannot ask why. The pain of knowing what his own blood did remains too sharp to approach directly. He raised the children the brother abandoned, stepped in when the first wife was pregnant, and the father was absent, stayed to the birth and the years that followed, tried to make right what could be made right, and still carries the knowledge that this one thing can never be fixed. Christy is gone. The family is destroyed. The neighborhood that once watched a curious new girl in vibrant spandex shorts and a windbreaker jacket and red-framed glasses that made her eyes look enormous move in next door now carries the memory of the monster who lived among them and hosed out the back of his van while people walked past wondering why a man who never washed a vehicle was suddenly cleaning it. Friends who stuck up for her at the bus stop, when others mocked her clothes and glasses still wonder how many times she was outside avoiding what was happening inside that house. The investigators who processed the scene still rank it among the most brutal they have ever seen. The smile that once lived on her face in the photographs the jury never got to see remains the only image some can hold without breaking. The same pattern of ordinary faces and hidden monsters repeats across years and states with different names and different victims, but the same cold emptiness at the center. Another brother looks back on a childhood in a small Michigan town where everyone knew everyone because their father was police chief and fire chief and mayor. Paper routes on opposite sides of town. Baseball, kickball, hide and seek, stuffed animals thrown between bedrooms after the parents went to sleep. He remembers the night his older brother walked into the room after the stuffed animals stopped coming back and said, "If you throw anything else, I will kill you," in a voice that did not sound like the brother he knew, a voice that was dark and unlike anything that had come before. He remembers the big, beautiful dog that jumped him on the paper route, put him on the ground, left bite marks but no blood, and was later found shot in the woods. He did not connect it then. People hunted. Dogs got into trouble. Later, the brother wrote about it in a manuscript from prison, describing how he got down on his belly with a shotgun and waited for the dog to come out into the backfield because it had hurt and scared his younger sibling. The brother served in the Navy in Japan, returned with stories that mixed violence and exaggeration so thoroughly that no one could tell where truth ended and performance began. One story involved a person from a bar who turned out not to be what was expected and ended with a beating, the first clear admission of violence. He married, seemed for a time to be a doting husband, then stabbed a woman multiple times during an episode involving drugs. He claimed she came at him with a knife over the drugs, claimed blackout, claimed he woke to find her bleeding on the floor. Cuts on his hands near the thumbs looked defensive. The temporary insanity plea worked enough to produce only 2 years. He emerged and became an over-the-road trucker, proud of the big truck, talking about the freedom of the open road, and also about the lot lizards at the stops. Friends later said he talked to taking prostitutes into the truck and dumping them in dumpsters when finished. He never said the word kill in those stories, but the implication hung there. Whether those women lived or died remains an open question that still haunts the sibling who once believed every colorful tale. Then came Vicky Sue Wall, met at a laundry that handled hospital linens, an affair conducted in parking lots, a surveillance tape that showed her getting into the truck and never being dropped off again, a body left in the woods so decomposed by heat that identification required dental records. The brother claimed she was into strangulation and rough sex, that she slumped over afterward, that he panicked and dumped her instead of taking her to a hospital. The jury convicted him of murder. 12 years. He emerged claiming to have found Christ, became a minister who could not find a church that would take him because of the background, dated online, met Sally, a kind and funny woman who said she adored him. He moved into her world. He formed what looked like a father-daughter bond with her daughter Rebecca, a beautiful, funny girl with a young son. Pizza nights, daycare runs, soup when he was sick, help with the child when she worked. Then the phone call that Rebecca was missing after he was supposed to pick up her son for a Halloween party. A day later, the body is found. Confession follows quickly. He walked through an unlocked door early on Halloween morning carrying a rubber mallet, struck her repeatedly in the hallway when she came to investigate the sound of the door, had sex with her corpse, and discarded her in a ditch. Fantasy videos of strangulation and post-mortem rape had been on a computer under names that made the content clear. He told police he had been drinking, that the videos showed him what he wanted to do, that he acted on the fantasy. 56 years. The sister who once offended him at every turn, who accepted every excuse, who hoped the ministry and the new life and the engagement meant real change, now looks at the booking photo and sees only a serial killer who is not the brother she grew up with. The brother she loved died long before the body in the ditch. When the call came that he had hanged himself in custody, she cried, but the detachment was already complete. The evil that had been let in somewhere along the way was finally gone. Hell is where that particular darkness belonged. Letters arrived afterward claiming sorrow and a desire to explain. She never answered. The calls came every day, and sometimes twice a day. She never accepted them. There was no story left that could make any of it someone else's fault. Another child grows up watching a father everyone called Whitey, a man with white hair when he was younger, who owned a bar in a small town, coached basketball for kids, carried cash because the work of getting people out of trouble sometimes required it, laughed easily, bought rounds, and was loved by nearly everyone who walked through his door. The new wife arrives tall, high energy, loud, insistent on attention and on being the center of every room. The child feels a shift immediately, a wrongness that settles in the gut and never leaves. Guns begin to appear under cushions and against walls and on stands, not locked away like hunting rifles, but scattered to the house as if ready.
Arguments escalate from ordinary friction into something darker. The wife rips shirts off when the father tries to leave to help his own mother. She pounds on locked car windows with pieces of wood while the child is inside, reaching for the keys, eyes black with a hat that does not look temporary. On Christmas Eve the threats arrive by phone, tell your father he is a dead man. The child is 11 and already looking over her shoulder, already learning to stay quiet so the weekends with the father can continue. Relatives warn the father to leave her. Uncles have serious conversations. The father stays. One Sunday everything seems better, they are looking at houses closer to the bars, the wife showing the child a future room as if the performance of happiness is complete. The next day the child is pulled from school. The grandmother is crying in the office. The father has been shot in the parking lot of the wife's bar. The shooter is Carl inside, a man the child has never heard of before. The wallet is found on him. The wife claims the large cash was for bailing people out of the way charges, an explanation the child never heard in all the years of watching the father get ready in the mornings with the wallet on the stand. At the funeral the wife circulates the room laughing, chatting, never lingering by the closed casket while the child sits crying and wondering why anyone would act like that after losing a husband. Later the wife appears at a basketball game, quiet and nervous, to insist she would never hit him, that she loved him, searching the child's face for belief. The child already knows. The trial reveals the conversation the night of the killing, the joking that was not joking, the repeated calls luring him to the bar while they had been fighting, the first shot in the parking lot, the fight, the fall, the jammed gun, the walk inside where the wife cleared the ham, the second shot. Carl receives the ad. The wife receives 25 to life with the possibility of parole. The child meets her years later in a controlled setting and refuses forgiveness out loud. No apology is ever offered. No acceptance of real responsibility appears. The father is gone from every big event, every ordinary conversation, every moment a child still needs a parent. The threats that began when the child was small continue in the form of possible releases amda. Looking over the shoulder never fully stops. The memory of the laugh, the coaching on the court, the way he entered the room and made everyone glad he was there, remains the only clean thing left to hold. These are not isolated monsters. They are the same pattern wearing different names and different decades, the stepfather who molests and ten silences with needle and hammer and plastic and a sledgehammer because a 14-year-old girl threatened to tell. The brother who progresses from shooting a dog to stabbing a woman to leaving another to decompose to walking into a trailer with a mallet on Halloween morning to act out a film fantasy, the wife who arranges a parking lot and bus drove upon and 10 miles at the funeral while the child watches. Each time the people closest feel the same fracture, the twin who protected through schoolyard ambushes and felt the connection that should have warned him, the sister who believed every story and gave the benefit of every doubt until the evidence became impossible to ignore. The daughter who tried to keep the weekends despite the guns and the threats and the ripped shirts and the black look in the eyes. Each time the investigators face the same gap between that certainty and usable evidence, the same fear of losing the suspect overnight, the same moment when a search for a living person becomes a recovery. Each time the community learns to late that the ordinary face was the danger, that the man housing out the van or the truck telling colorful stories or the loud new wife who seemed big energy and fan carried something else entirely. The girl in the woods with plastic over her head, the woman left to decompose in the ad, the body in the ditch on Halloween, the man shot twice outside a bar. These are the final results of choices made by people who decided their own desires or angers or fears or fantasies outweighed another human life. The survivors carried the knowledge that they could not prevent it, that the twin connection failed to transmit the warning in time, that the benefit of the doubt was misplaced for years, that the child who sensed something wrong was right all alone and still could not stop what was coming. They speak now, decades later, not because closure is possible, closure does not exist in these stories, but because the telling itself is the only remaining act of resistance against the silence the monsters prefer. One more person who hears might notice the red flag that was missed before, the odd comment from a parent about a temper, the sudden cleaning of a vehicle that never needed cleaning, the threat spoken in a voice that did not sound like the person they knew, the scattered guns, the performance of happiness that arrives right before the end. One more child might be asked the questions that were never asked of Christy about what was happening at home. One more relative might stop accepting the plausible excuse and the temporary story. The monsters are gone or locked away or dead by their own hand. The damage is permanent. The stories remain told without titles or neat endings or easy lessons, because the only honest form is the continuous pressure of memory that never lets the ordinary face settle back into safety. That keeps the smile of a 14-year-old girl and the laugh of a barrow owner and the ordinary childhood games of two brothers alive against the darkness that tried to erase them.